I had been an exam proctor for the Galactic Academy for 17 cycles, and in all that time, I had never seen anything quite as absurd as what happened during the standard combat assessment of 2347. Let me back up a bit. My name is Vorik, and I am a Zenthari, which means I have 4 eyes, excellent peripheral vision, and absolutely no patience for rule breakers. The combat assessment is supposed to be straightforward. We take candidates from various species, strip them of their equipment, place them in a controlled environment, and observe how they handle simulated threats. No weapons allowed. That is the whole point. We want to see tactical thinking, not who brought the biggest gun. The human arrived on a Tuesday morning, looking completely unremarkable. His name was Marcus Webb, according to the registration files. Average height for his species, brown hair, green eyes, wearing the standard gray jumpsuit we provided all candidates. He smiled at me when he checked in. Actually smiled. Like he was attending a social gathering instead of an exam that had a 42% failure rate. Morning, he said, far too cheerfully for someone about to spend 6 hours in a combat simulation. Beautiful day, isn't it? I blinked at him with all 4 eyes. We were inside a climate-controlled facility on Station Epsilon. There was no day. There was no weather. Please proceed to the preparation area, I said, gesturing with my upper left appendage. You have 20 minutes before the assessment begins. He gave me a thumbs up, another bizarre human gesture, and strolled toward the prep room like he did not have a care in the universe. The preparation area was simple. A bench, a hygiene station, and a food dispenser. Candidates were given a basic meal before the exam because, well, we are not monsters. The simulations could be intense, and nobody performs well on an empty stomach. The meal was always the same, a protein bar, a nutritional paste in a sealed container, and everything served on a standard-issue polymer tray. Watched through the observation window as Marcus collected his breakfast. He sat down, unwrapped the protein bar, and took a bite. Normal behavior. Then he picked up the tray, turned it over in his hands, and examined it with the kind of focus usually reserved for analyzing enemy battle formations. That is odd, muttered Kelsa, my fellow proctor. She was a Vrixian, all scales and sharp teeth, and she had been doing this job even longer than I had. Why is he staring at his tray like that? Humans are strange, I replied, which was my standard explanation for about 70% of human behavior. Marcus set the tray down, finished his protein bar, consumed the nutritional paste, and then, here's where things got interesting, he stood up and walked to the corner of the room. He knelt down, and I swear on my ancestors' carapace, he started rubbing the edge of the tray against the concrete floor, back and forth. Back and forth. The sound came through the audio feed, a rhythmic scraping that made my scales itch. What is he doing? Kelsa leaned closer to the monitor. I have absolutely no idea. For the next 15 minutes, Marcus Webb worked that polymer tray against the floor with the determination of someone trying to tunnel out of a maximum security prison. The edge of the tray began to change shape. It was subtle at first, but then it became obvious. He was sharpening it. The human was turning his breakfast tray into a weapon. That is not allowed. Kelsa's crest flared up in agitation. The rules specifically state no weapons. He did not bring a weapon, I pointed out, unable to suppress a hint of amusement. He is making one. From a tray. Technically, we never said he could not do that. Kelsa turned to glare at me with her triple-jointed neck. Because we never thought anyone would try. By the time the 15-minute warning chimed, Marcus had transformed approximately 8 inches of the tray's edge into something that looked disturbingly sharp. He tested it against his thumb, nodded in satisfaction, and then wrapped the handle portion with strips torn from his jumpsuit sleeve to improve his grip. This is ridiculous, Kelsa muttered. He will be disqualified. But I pulled up the rule documentation on my tablet, scanning through the regulations. Actually, no. The rules state that candidates cannot bring weapons into the exam. There is nothing here about fabricating weapons from provided materials. That is a loophole. That is human ingenuity. The exam began precisely on schedule. The preparation room door opened, and Marcus stepped into the simulation chamber, his makeshift blade held casually at his side. The chamber was a massive space, easily 200 meters across, with variable terrain that could shift and change based on the scenario. For this particular assessment, we had programmed an urban warfare environment, complete with ruined buildings, narrow alleyways, and plenty of cover. The first wave of combat drones deployed 30 seconds later. These were not sophisticated machines, just basic-level threats designed to test reflexes and decision-making. Most candidates either ran for cover or tried to disable the drones with thrown objects. Marcus did neither, charged straight at the nearest drone, ducked under its stun beam, and drove his polymer blade directly into its central processing unit. Sparks flew. The drone dropped like a stone. Did he just? Kelsa could not even finish her sentence. The human was already moving to the second drone, using a piece of rubble as a springboard to launch himself up and over its defensive position. Another thrust, another dead drone. His movements were efficient, economical, almost casual. By the time the first wave ended, all 6 drones were scattered across the arena floor, each one sporting a precision puncture wound. That should not be possible, Kelsa whispered. Those drones have reinforced casings. Polymer is stronger than people think, I said, pulling up the material specifications. And he seems to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. The second wave was harder. 12 drones, more aggressive programming, equipped with small plasma projectors that could deliver quite painful shocks. The standard strategy was evasion and endurance, outlasting the drones until their power cells depleted. Marcus had a different strategy. He used the terrain, luring drones into confined spaces where their numbers worked against them. When 3 drones cornered him in an alley, he did something I had never seen before. He threw his makeshift weapon like a spear, piercing one drone, then immediately grabbed the disabled machine and used it as both a shield and a bludgeon against the other 2. He is using the drones against each other, I observed, somewhat unnecessarily. I can see that, Vorik. The third wave introduced the twist that typically eliminated most candidates. A combat drone designated as a commander unit, larger, faster, with predictive algorithms that could anticipate basic tactics. It also had a proper energy shield. Most candidates failed here because they kept trying the same approaches that had worked on the earlier, simpler drones. The commander learned from each attempt and adapted. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, watching the commander unit orbit him at a distance, its sensors analyzing him, searching for patterns. He waved at it, actually waved, like he was greeting a neighbor. Then he picked up a piece of rubble and threw it. Not at the commander, but at a wall behind it. The rock bounced, creating noise and movement. The commander's sensors flickered toward the disturbance for just a fraction of a second. That was when Marcus moved. Not toward the commander, but away, sprinting for a collapsed structure. He disappeared into the shadows, and the commander, predictive algorithms running, moved to intercept where it calculated he would emerge, but Marcus did not emerge. Not where expected, anyway. He had climbed. Humans are exceptional climbers, something to do with their shoulder flexibility and grip strength. He was on top of the structure, and when the commander passed underneath, he dropped directly onto it, his polymer blade held in a reverse grip, and drove it down with all his body weight into the seam where the shield generator connected to the main chassis. The shield flickered. Died. The commander unit tried to shake him off, but Marcus held on like some kind of persistent parasite, striking again and again at critical junction points until the unit simply stopped functioning. He climbed down, retrieved his blade, and checked it for damage. The edge was dulled but still serviceable. The entire exam room had gone silent. I looked around at my fellow proctors, all of them staring at the monitors with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. He is only halfway through, someone whispered. Marcus Webb stood in the arena, surrounded by the mechanical corpses of our combat drones, holding a weapon he had carved from his breakfast tray, waiting for whatever came next. And that was when I realized something important. We had not made the exam harder for humans. We needed to make everything else harder because humans existed. The real test was just beginning. The simulation chamber hummed as it reconfigured for the fourth wave, and I found myself leaning closer to the monitors. Beside me, Kelsa had stopped protesting and started taking notes, her datapad stylus moving frantically across the screen. "Do we have any other humans scheduled for assessment this cycle?" she asked without looking up. 3 more next week. Why? Because I need to completely redesign our evaluation criteria, that is why. Marcus was examining his makeshift blade, running his finger along the edge. Even from the camera angle, I could see the polymer had warped from repeated impacts against reinforced drone casings. A normal candidate would be concerned. He just shrugged, walked over to a disabled drone, and started prying off metal plates. What is he doing now? This came from Thex, another proctor who had wandered over from the adjacent testing bay. Word was spreading fast. "I believe," I said slowly, watching Marcus work, "he is upgrading." The human used a piece of sharp debris to punch holes through the drone plating, then threaded strips of his already ruined jumpsuit through them, creating a crude but functional handle. He wedged his dulled polymer blade into the assembly, tested the weight, and suddenly he had a completely new weapon. Part club, part blade, entirely improvised. That is cheating. Thex's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Show me where in the rules it says he cannot do that," I replied, genuinely curious if anyone would find something I had missed. Nobody did. The fourth wave materialized, and this is where the exam typically separated the competent from the exceptional. 6 heavy assault drones, each one armored enough to shrug off direct hits from standard plasma rifles. They moved in coordinated patterns, covering each other's blind spots, communicating through encrypted channels. Standard protocol was to avoid direct confrontation and focus on completing the secondary objectives that would appear around the arena. Nobody actually tried to fight these things. Marcus sprinted directly at them. "No, no, no," Kelsa muttered, "that is suicide." But the human was not being reckless. He was being unpredictable. The drones had been programmed to expect evasion, cover-seeking, tactical withdrawal. They were not programmed for a frontal assault from a candidate armed with garbage. Slid under the first drone's weapon tracking, came up swinging his improvised club against its leg joint. The impact barely dented the armor, but that was not the point. The drone pivoted to track him, which meant it turned away from its support position. Marcus was already gone, using the momentary gap in their formation to slip through. One of the drones fired, missed, and hit another drone instead. Friendly fire. Their coordination algorithms immediately kicked in, forcing a formation reset. 3 precious seconds of confusion. Marcus used 2 of those seconds to reach a pile of rubble. He used the 3rd second to overturn it, revealing, and I had to check the simulation logs to confirm this, an equipment cache that was not supposed to be discovered until Wave 7. He memorized the arena layout, I said, impressed despite myself. How? He only had the standard briefing. Humans have excellent spatial memory. And he was probably paying attention while we thought he was just making breakfast weapons. The cache contained a length of high tensile cable, designed for a later puzzle challenge. Marcus grabbed it, looped it around a structural support beam, and created a tripwire across one of the main approach paths. The drones, following their programmed patrol patterns, did not see it coming. 2 of them went down in a tangle of metal limbs and error messages. The human was already moving again, this time climbing a damaged wall to gain elevation. From his perch, he waited. Patience. That is something most candidates lack. They feel pressure to constantly act, constantly move. Marcus just waited, conserving energy, watching the remaining 4 drones search for him. When one passed beneath his position, he dropped his weighted club directly onto its sensor array. The drone staggered, blinded, firing randomly. Marcus was already descending the other side of the wall. His stamina should be depleting. Kelsa checked the biometric readouts. He has been in constant motion for 40 minutes. His heart rate is barely elevated. That is not normal. For humans? I am beginning to think it is. The 5th wave was my personal contribution to the exam design, and I will admit, I felt a small surge of pride. Environmental hazards. The arena floor began venting steam at random intervals, sensors would malfunction, lighting would flicker, gravity generators would create localized anomalies. Candidates had to navigate all of this while dealing with swarm drones, small fast machines that attacked in groups of 20 or more. Marcus took one look at the steam vents and smiled. Actually smiled. He positioned himself near the largest vent, waited for the swarm to converge on his position, and the moment they entered the steam cloud, he struck. The moisture interfered with their sensors, the heat played havoc with their cooling systems, and Marcus moved through them like some kind of ancient Earth predator, his blade finding critical components with frightening accuracy. 14 drones disabled in under 2 minutes, the remaining 6 learned, adapting their approach vectors. But Marcus had already moved to a gravity anomaly, letting the distortion pull several drones off course, sending them crashing into walls and each other. He is using our own exam design against us, Thex observed, his tone somewhere between admiration and horror. That is the point of the exam, I reminded him. Adapt, overcome, survive. But he is doing it with a tray. Technically, he upgraded past the tray several waves ago. The 6th wave introduced the element most candidates dreaded. Psychological warfare. Holographic projections designed to disorient, audio frequencies calibrated to induce stress responses, and a shape-shifting opponent that could mimic the candidate's own appearance. The doppelganger Marcus appeared at the far end of the arena, moving with identical body language, holding an identical improvised weapon. Real Marcus stopped, tilted his head, and studied his duplicate. Then he did something completely unexpected. He waved again. Same casual gesture he had used earlier. The doppelganger, programmed to mimic, waved back. Marcus immediately attacked, because the real Marcus would never waste time on theatrical gestures during an actual fight. He had been testing for autonomous behavior patterns. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The hologram flickered under the assault, its projection matrix unable to maintain cohesion against physical disruption. Within seconds, it dissolved completely. He saw through our most sophisticated psychological test in under 10 seconds, Kelsa said flatly. Humans are remarkably difficult to fool, I noted. They evolved as both predators and prey, which makes them exceptionally good at spotting deception. The 7th and final wave was the grand finale. Everything at once. Multiple drone types, environmental hazards, limited visibility, and a countdown timer. Candidates had to locate and secure 3 objective points while surviving everything we threw at them. Most candidates barely managed 1 objective. The record was 2, held by a Kravaxian combat specialist who went on to become a decorated military officer. Marcus looked at the chaos erupting around him, checked his battered weapon one last time, and started running. Not toward the nearest objective. Toward the most defended one. He is going for the hard target first, I realized. That is insane. The difficulty scales down as time progresses. Standard strategy is to grab the easy objectives and wait out the clock. When has he done anything standard? The 3rd objective was guarded by a siege drone, essentially a mobile fortress with enough firepower to level a small building. It was meant to be impossible, a test of judgment, to see if candidates would recognize when to withdraw. Marcus did not withdraw. He studied the siege drone's firing pattern, noted the 3-second recharge delay between volleys, and used that window to advance. Cover to cover, debris to crater, never staying still long enough to become a target. When he got close, he did something that made my secondary heart skip a beat. He climbed onto the siege drone itself, using its own bulk as cover from the other threats in the arena. The drone could not target him while he was on top of it. Its weapons could not angle upward enough. So Marcus simply held on, riding it like some kind of mechanical beast, waiting. The drone, following its programming, moved toward the most recent threat detected. which meant it drove directly to the objective point. Marcus jumped off, grabbed the objective marker, and sprinted away while the siege drone inadvertently cleared the area of other hostiles with its covering fire. He turned the boss enemy into an escort, Thex said weakly. Objectives 2 and 1 fell quickly after that. Marcus had figured out the arena's spawn patterns, predicted where drones would emerge, and positioned himself accordingly. By the time the countdown reached 0, he was standing in the designated safe zone, all 3 objectives secured, surrounded by the wreckage of our finest combat simulations. His makeshift weapon finally broke, the polymer blade snapping off from the drone plate assembly. He looked at it for a moment, then carefully set it down like it was an honored companion being laid to rest. The simulation ended. The arena lights came up to full brightness. The medical team was standing by, as they always were, expecting to treat the usual collection of bruises, exhaustion, maybe a minor burn or 2. Marcus walked out under his own power, barely winded, with nothing more than some torn clothing and a few scratches. I met him at the exit, datapad in hand, trying to figure out exactly what to write in my report. Congratulations, Candidate Webb, I managed. You have completed the assessment. Thanks. That same cheerful tone from the morning. That was fun. When do I get my scores? Fun. He called it fun. Your performance was unusual, I said carefully. You created a weapon from your breakfast tray. Well, yeah. You said no weapons allowed, not no weapons possible. He grinned. Seemed like a pretty obvious solution to me. Obvious. The human thought completely restructuring our entire assessment was obvious. You do realize, Kelsa spoke up from behind me, that you have just set a new academy record. Perfect score. All objectives completed. 0 assistance required. Fastest completion time in the exam's history. Marcus blinked, processing this. Huh. Cool. So, does that mean I passed? You did not just pass, I said, finally allowing myself to show some emotion. You have fundamentally changed how we will evaluate combat candidates from this point forward. He looked genuinely confused by this. I just did what made sense. And that, right there, was the most terrifying part. For Marcus Webb, for humans in general, this level of creative problem-solving, this refusal to accept limitations, this absolute determination to turn any situation to their advantage, it was just normal. We had designed an exam to test the galaxy's best. We had created obstacles we thought were insurmountable. We had programmed scenarios meant to push candidates to their breaking point, and a human had walked in, turned his breakfast tray into a weapon, and casually demolished everything we thought we knew about combat assessment. Finalized my report with a single recommendation, one that would echo through the Galactic Academy for generations to come. Note: when evaluating human candidates, expect the impossible. Then expect them to exceed that. Marcus Webb left the facility that afternoon, completely unaware that he had just made military history. Somewhere behind him, 36 proctors were frantically rewriting exam protocols, and the maintenance crew was still trying to figure out how to repair all the damaged equipment. And me? I was already dreading next week when 3 more humans were scheduled for assessment. Had a feeling I would need to order more breakfast trays, many, many more.